This is World at War 85. It's the situation at the end of the 17th turn of 20 for breakthrough to Frankfort. Things have really livened up in the last couple of turns. There's absolute carnage going on here as the Russians basically have got to capture these objectives, and it doesn't really matter how many casualties you take. So they've exposed some of their tanks, and those Leopard 2 tanks absolutely decimating the Soviet tanks. Just piles of wreckage and things where they've been defeated. Now the Russians are in a bit of a problem because they've got their tanks in the city area where they don't want them to be, but because they had to basically get close to the objectives, what they're doing is trying to bring their infantry in now, and they've got a lot more infantry than the NATO forces, so it's not looking good for NATO around here. The only thing that's going to save them, I think, is time, because you've only got 3 turns to go. Up here the situation's far worse. This tank regiment here has taken an utter beating to get to this position, but it's still functional. And yeah, again, they've had to use tanks to occupy the city axis, which it's not really what they're trying to achieve. It's not optimum, but the infantry's starting to arrive now, moving into the city. So it's going to be a case of the NATO forces are going to have to fight their way into this city area to actually stop them from losing the game. But there's NATO forces that are getting very close, but yet again it's a time element. You've only got 3 turns to get into the city and get rid of all the Russian forces here. I think there's no hope of that, but we'll see. It just depends on how the formation cards come out. There's a possibility that NATO could still win this scenario, but it's not looking good. And one thing I have done is I've withdrawn the electronic warfare card, which, to be honest, it was a big mistake putting that in. It's an optional thing so long as both sides agree, but it really, because the Soviets had the advantage, it's really played heavily against the NATO player. So I certainly wouldn't advise a NATO player to take the option of electronic warfare unless you are really the better player. I think that was a big mistake. Another thing that's cost the NATO player a bit is the fact they haven't got any air support due to the torrential rain that basically kicked in virtually straight away. I've been hoping for a battlefield friction card to actually come out and give us a change in the weather for the better, but it's just not worked. But just remember that even if you have got air assets in this game, they are incredibly vulnerable to missile systems, and they also have to throw to actually get to the battlefield, because there's huge amounts of fighting going on in the air above us. Air support, when it can get through, it's pretty significant, but a lot of the time it just never makes it to the battlefield. So it's all to play for, but I think the Warsaw Pact have won this.